What is a habit? And
Something you do over and over again, practice.
okay, so it's something like a behavior.
Yeah, but also the drum kicks in automatically or on a trigger.
Automatically trigger. Okay.
Least amount of resistance to do the thing.
Okay.
Just very simple to do that you don't even think about it.
Yeah. How about, so if we want to change this sound, it's an action, it's a reaction, it's something that's very quick. What is it? Is it tangible? Is it physical? Where is it stored? How can we get to it? Or if that's too hard, what has shaped it to be? As Erin was just... The habit, did it just come out of nowhere?
Or lived experiences and past relationships.
It's an experience. So something about an experience you had, probably more than once, maybe some repetition to it, did something to you, making an action, a habit happen, right? So what did it change in you?
There was probably some sort of reward, right? And your brain was like, okay, that was cool, let's do this again, right? And then you kept on doing that, and the reward was still there, and then it was just went into automatic mode. Like I don't have to think about it, I don't have to make any decisions, right? It's just like, I know that this particular behavior is gonna result in that particular something, right?
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely, absolutely. I think you're totally right. There's some sort of, even maladaptive behaviors have this, they're initially adaptive to the situation, right? A lot of times they become maladaptive later on, or they went through perfect. I have some examples on how things work, but they're not perfect, and they can cause a lot of issues. Great. So already, I'm really excited to teach you guys now, because we're talking a lot about the actions and behaviors, but if we want to talk about how do we change them, neuroplasticity has to do with those habits are ingrained in your neurons. Your behavior, your thoughts and actions are a result of the 80 billion neurons in your brain, over 100 trillion synaptic connections, more synaptic connections in your brain than there are stars in the seeable universe, creating this symphony, this orchestra, the interplay of just constantly buzzing electrical fields. And the wiring of that changes over time with repetition. That is the physical piece that manifests your habits and things change. So that is neuroplasticity. That's why we're here talking about that. This is
Neurobiology, neurobiology, neurobiology leads with your psychology. Neurobiology, neurobiology, neurobiology leads with your psychology. Neurobiology, neurobiology, neurobiology. Talk about some dopamine. Neurobiology, neurobiology, neurobiology. K-dope on the scene.
Make it a little opaque here, but this is called the rainbow. It's the hippocampus, one of the areas I'm an expert in, and this is just a small. In your brain, this is about 2 millimeters long by 2 millimeters, and just in this one little slice, you see all the neural connections. And so when we talk about neuroplasticity, we're talking about each of these connections. You zoom in, and there's like thousands of little spines on each one that just reach out and contact each other. You can't even see them at this scale. It's mind-boggling. The more I learn about the brain, the more I become more amazed and think we're never going to figure it out because it's so complicated. But it's amazing. So neuroplasticity, the definition is experience-dependent changes to the brain's physiological structure. So real structural changes that we can tangibly see, and I'm going to show you some of those today. Our best examples of them. And I'd like to say things a few different ways to see if they can hit. It refers to the brain's remarkable ability to change, reorganize, and adapt throughout life. Like, this is a critical piece to being a living organism with a brain, especially humans. And it forms and reshapes itself, much like plastic forms to something. That's one of the nice ways to remember what neuroplasticity is. The brain is incredibly plastic. It's constantly changing. Every second of your life is you have propensity for change. And I'm going to keep hitting that point throughout this. Go ahead. And another really easy way to think about it, it's changes to your brain as a result of living through experiences. I could really shorten that even more to just say as a result of living. Yeah.
Oh, no, it was
Oh, you have? Oh, you liked it. You're like, yeah.
Yeah, it
Cool.
makes sense.
Cool. Go ahead. Awesome. Cool. So this is, and then this is just a quick visualization at a brain simulation created by real human EEG data and some other scans.
That's bonkers. That's a healthy brain.
As far as I know.
Yeah.
Again, 80 billion neurons.
What's going on? Is it based on some real world
Yes, it is.
recording?
Yes, it is. Really, EEG. I'll talk about this is from DTI, diffuser tensor imaging. I'll talk about that with white matter tracks later.
But it's not like real time. It's probably
It's
much
definitely
more slowed down.
simulated. Yeah,
Why
a little
not?
slowed. Probably a little slowed. They weren't as upfront about their methods with this, but it's beautiful. And this is absolutely, your brain is active all the time. That's why that 10% use of your brain myth, I don't know if anyone's heard of that. That's one of the things that really gets me going. I have to go walk in a room and have some words with people. Your neurons are always active. If they weren't active, they would die. They have to be active. You can go ahead and. So you each have that inside of you, creating your consciousness, your experience, your ability to see me right now. We're all freaking amazing. And so at one point in life, there's always different perspectives in life. I hold this duality. We can think we're really small and infinitesimal to the size of the universe, but we're also this amazing, beautiful thing that came out of stardust, really, if all the elements were created in the stars. I was a big astrobiology nerd, too. So, cool. So, these changes, there are two main types of plasticity that I want you to be aware of. One is active and one is kind of regulatory. Okay. The most famous is called Hebbian neuroplasticity. Go ahead and for Donald Hebb. Donald Hebb in the 1970s had the first experiments to discover this. It's in the 1970s. Neuroscience is such a young field. He found experimental evidence of neurons that were firing close in time, one after another, boop, 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 boop. That when they did that repeatedly, he actually had direct evidence that they were now more likely to always fire together. He didn't have evidence yet in the 70s of the molecular and physiological structural changes, but he knew by their effect, their actions, that neurons are becoming wired together. And so up here we have two neurons. How many have seen the structure of a neuron and recognize this before? It's okay if you don't. Okay. Cool, this is good to know. So signals come in through these dendrites up here. A electrical charge called an action potential goes down these yellow areas. We're going to talk more about this myelin here. And this is the electrical part. And then it comes out through these boutons, these little blue round ends. And then it turns into a chemical signal, neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, glutamate, GABA. Hence, an electrochemical signal is what is happening between all of your neurons. It's not just electricity, it's not just chemicals, it's actually both. And so generally, transmission goes to electricity, release the neurotransmitters, they then trigger another electrical response in the neuron. Okay? And he's saying the more these happen together in time, or even these two neurons, if they fire, since they're contacting this one, if these two fire within a few milliseconds of each other, even though their downstream target is this one here, these will become wired together too. And this whole circuit will fire together. Okay. And we're going to talk about how that actually happens, the structural, and I'll show you some videos on that. We make all Psych 101 students at UW say this, so I want to have you all say it together once. I'll say it first. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Let's go. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Yeah. All right. Just like we're wiring our brains together here for positive life changes. All right. And then that's the wiring, the positive or maladaptive wiring creating behavior in you. The other side of the coin is use it or lose it. That absolutely applies here too. If you want to lose a habit, stop using it. Right? Start doing something else and try to just do something a little bit less, so that it's not that activity patterns, the neurons that are all responsible for initiating that maladaptive behavior or that reaction. Every time you use them, they're becoming, those neurons, that pathway, that behavior is ingraining more and more. And so
So could those two neurons up there that you said could wire together, even though they have a different down point?
Yeah.
Could that be like, for example, things that become associated together?
Totally.
So I cook dinner, I have a glass of wine. Now every time I cook dinner, I want to drink.
Yep.
Right? Like
Yeah.
that? Those would be represented in those
Yeah.
two actions?
This is like Pavlov and the dog and the bell.
Just
Yeah.
making sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Associative, I think, because that's a lot of what
Mhm.
they talk about. Yep. Great. Okay. I think I'm gonna have to start going a lot faster. All right. So you can't see it. Activity dependent or associative. All right. Importantly, this one says you got to have some activity from one driving the activity in another, and that wires them together. Lack of activity, and they become loosened. The connections literally, physically start to degrade, and they don't fire together as much. Go ahead. So homeostatic plasticity is a little different, made by Dr. Gina Turgiano. She had experiments in the 1990s. This one's a little more complicated to explain with her experiments, but it's a lot like she found neurons with their firing of action potentials. They fire action potentials at rates around anywhere from 5 hertz up to 160 hertz. They have some normal set point, like your thermostat might be set at 70 degrees. A neuron might be set at 20 hertz firing frequency. She was able to deprive some neurons of normal input, and in another condition, actually overstimulate them to the point, like if it was your brain, you'd be having epilepsy. But these are neurons in a petri dish. But she found evidence that these neurons started doing physical changes to themselves in order to regulate themselves to a set point, both internally and externally. Yes. Go ahead. So actual evidence of this is this. If these little squiggly lines here, this would be like you're listening. We listen to action potentials to neurons a lot. It would go. Right, that's that. You could raise the firing, or you can hear nothing from the low firing. Right? In both of these cases, homeostatic plasticity mechanism wants to get the neurons firing right back to this, and so they will then. This takes quite a bit of time, sometimes weeks, but it will come back to that set point if it is indeed out of its area. So that's a really simple example of that. Some real life situations, this has actually been shown in some like psychology studies, come up as like in instances of extreme sensory deprivation. Neurons in your brain will actually start firing a little bit more and can make hallucinations and things in the brain. This one, synaptic scaling. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Just wanted to ask a question. So, what happens initially when these ones are firing? So, these are neurons in petri dish, right?
Yeah.
Like, on some frequency, there's like just going like boom, 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 right? Like, activating.
Yeah. They're getting hit with a current, too. They're patch clamps and so
I
it's
see.
driving something to them.
I see. And so, like, these lower firing or raised firing is about we modulate the input to them, and over time they do something to go back to the state they were at, physically changing to get to this.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh.
No, that's exactly right. It does. We did something to it
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
out of the normal, and it changed internally itself. Inside of a single little neuron, there's a whole universe of things happening. It's quite amazing. Trafficking proteins and microtubules, and the membranes have things all over that regulate excited movements.
You can basically say the system is trending towards homeostasis, like the body is trending to right itself.
Yeah,
at every
each cell.
opportunity.
Yeah,
That's cool.
hence homeostatic.
And is this when we
Plasticity.
see increased tolerance to drugs? Like
This one.
Yeah.
This synaptic scaling is exactly it.
Okay.
It's also one of the ways SSRIs probably work, because we actually don't know how SSRIs work. But it takes around 2 weeks, they say. And traditional antidepressants, well, they actually think it's because it takes 2 weeks for receptors to change. So in synaptic scaling, this is a synapse, a traditional synapse, where this top little weird blob looking thing would be right here. That would be this piece right there. And then this bottom one would be one of the dendrites here. And these two are touching each other, or just close enough touching each other. And then the gray little circles are neurotransmitters like dopamine or serotonin. And then they would be released out and bind to these little red proteins, which are receptors here. So if that's a dopamine neurotransmitter, hopefully those are dopamine receptors. If they're not dopamine receptors, they're not going to do anything. If it's a glutamate receptor, you release dopamine. Doesn't matter. You need a whole lock and key mechanism. So if we're moving. Okay. Basically, over time, if you have a lot of this dopamine being released, what we say postsynaptic, the downstream neuron synapse will actually downregulate the amount of receptors there. And then this is what we're talking about with tolerance a lot. Actually, with cocaine addicts, this is a huge problem where you can, and we study this a lot in neuroscience because cocaine releases and traps dopamine like in 3 or 4 different ways powerfully in the synapse. If somebody uses like cocaine a lot and has all this dopamine constantly flooding their synapse, they might not even have one of these here. They might have like every other little synaptic gluton might eventually have a dopamine receptor. Why? It's because they're like, hey, we're getting activated a lot. This is not normal, so let's make sure we don't have the actual feelers out to pick up this dopamine because there's too much. So it's not, because otherwise this neuron that's receiving that input, it could die from excitotoxicity, we call it. They can fire too much. So, but what does that mean? That means when you go back to normal life and you're not flooding your synapse with tons of dopamine, guess what? You have you have to look far and wide for a dopamine receptor from your normal everyday activities. Therefore, the normal amount of dopamine that just like going to work and doing things that you should be motivated to do, you don't get any pleasure or motivation out of them because your brain's literally changed the receptors. You will get it back with time. It just takes time. You'll have to go through that. It's this push-pull mechanism. You'll have to come back and hopefully get to another set point where it starts making those. Cool. Great. Very quick. Cool. So it's a lot like a thermostat. Optimizes conditions and regulates. The new I learned, I spent a lot of time digging into newer research. They call it heterostatic plasticity. This is a combination of them, because now we're realizing everything's a combination. Which is why maximizing control of your life and habits requires a holistic approach to these different mechanisms. Caring for both homeostatic mechanisms creates optimal physiological conditions, thereby facilitating Hebbian neuroplastic changes. Okay. Intention and repetition with the right environment is going to set you up for really nice changes in your life.
Neurobiology, these are your psychology. Neurobiology, talk about some dopamine. Neurobiology, K-dope on the scene.